Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today talking a little bit about the patient experience from the perspective of customer experience. Um, Thanks, Dr. Bogdani. I really enjoyed your presentation. Um, so let's get into it. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Ross Lucivero. This is not a typo. I don't have any post-nominal letters after my name. No initials, no acronyms. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV. So my perspective on the patient experience is a little bit different. It comes from a perspective of customer experience. So, what impacts the customer? What are their expectations, and what are some of the technology trends that we see that are going to ultimately impact the patient experience? So, I'm the managing director of Verndale in Los Angeles. So a little bit about Verndale. So we're a full-service customer experience agency. We design and build web and mobile and commerce experiences that help connect the dots of the customer journey. And we believe that a better experience leads to better business. We have our headquarters in Boston, Massachusetts. We have an office in LA and also Quito, Ecuador. So at Verndale, we have a tagline. Our tagline is "Experience is everything." And what we mean by that is we look at everything that we do under the lens of the customer experience. And we believe that if you're not coming from that perspective, then ultimately you're not going to have the optimal outcome. And it doesn't matter if you have the best IT or the best branding or the best marketing. If the outcome is not a great customer experience, then everything else is really superfluous. So a little bit about our experience. We've been at it for 21 years. We like to say we have a lot of experience in customer experience. These are some of our clients in the healthcare industry, as Evan also gave some of my credentials. So when we work with our clients, we need to figure out where do we invest our time and our energy and resources and money. And the world is complicated. It's changing very fast. And when we approach something with our clients, we talk about it in our own 80-20 rule, which is we want to be focused on optimizing for today, so understanding what makes businesses run and kind of keeping the lights on. And then we want to be looking into the future and spending about 20% of our time future-proofing for tomorrow, because we don't want to become outdated and a thing of the past. So the way that we do that, usually when we sit down with our clients, we talk to them about their business goals and things like, what are their main business drivers, where they want to be in a few years. Sometimes it's the big goals, like we want to go from a $500 million company to a $750 million company, or maybe they want to increase, customer retention by 10%, or maybe they want to, increase or decrease the cost of customer acquisition. So, we try to take all those big, lofty goals and map a digital strategy to hopefully fulfill those goals. And the way that we do that is through a practice called future casting, which is basically just kind of looking off into the future and saying, okay, if you want to be here in 3 years, we really need to look, to 5 years to figure out, where is the industry going to be, where are the trends taking us, and we really need to, forecast out to that time and then back down to make sure that we hit the mark in that period of time. So, we also use this philosophy called the cone of possibilities, and this is not something that we came up with. It's just something you can look up and learn about it. But basically, it's the idea that as you go throughout time on the x-axis, time goes on, and then as you go on the y and z axis, you have kind of what is possible. And the further that you get out on the axis, things become less likely to happen. And on that center of the cone, that's where things are probably going to happen. So the idea is that if you're a business, you have to be right about the investments you make on the things that are going to happen, right? That center of the cone, you kind of know what's going to happen. But if you're going to invest in something, you have to be right about those things. And then, as you get further out on the cone, you can be a little more risky, and you can say, well, maybe this is going to happen, or maybe it's not, and maybe you can invest and be a little risky about those things. But there's also this idea of preferred outcomes. And, the idea of this is that, for an example, for myself, if I was in a relationship with a partner, it's a probable outcome that, we could get married and have kids. And if it's a preferred outcome between the two of us, meaning we both want that to happen, it becomes more likely to happen. Now, society has this concept too, right? So you have the collections of people, and if you want something to become a preferred outcome, and it's probable, it's kind of more likely to happen. So we're looking at this cone and saying, well, what are the preferred outcomes? What are the probable outcomes? And how do we plan for the future? And so our way of doing this, we do it for our clients, but we also do it for ourselves. So we put together an annual report called the NEXT report, so NEXT, what's next in customer experience. And in this report, we look into the future and we say, well, what do we think is going to happen in industry trends and technology? And, we go through the cone of possibilities. And the reason why we do this is because we want to be better advocates for our clients so that they understand where technology is going. And if we don't do this, then, we're not serving our clients well. And obviously, digital transformation is very expensive and takes time and resources. So hopefully we can be a better partner to our clients to do this. We also have a mobile app that you can download. It has some of the content that I'll be talking about today, and also curated content that we refresh on a regular basis. And finally, the last bit about what I do is that we also do these deeper dives called trend spots about specific industries, and we've done one in the healthcare industry, and you can download that as well. So, but today we're here to talk about the patient experience and understanding it, right? So, the patient experience is so complicated. There's so many touch points, and so many different outcomes, and healthcare is complicated. So, how do we kind of dissect the patient and who they are, and what do they want, and where do we begin, right? Well, here's a good starting point. Patients are people. It's easy to kind of jump into point solutions and say, well, the patient wants this, or the patient wants this, and I'm going to come up with some tech that gives this outcome. When really, patients are, me, you, your mother, father, sister, brother, and people want the same thing, regardless of whether they're a patient or a customer, or you're buying something on Amazon, or you're going to the doctors, right? We want convenience, we want value, we want, empathy, we want people who can relate to us. So, it's easy to get bogged down into like just this overwhelming, atmosphere of things going on. But when you really boil it down, it's a simple understanding, but it's a complex problem to solve. So the reason why I like Dr. Bogdani's presentation so much is that, being a doctor in the healthcare space, it was interesting for me, who's not in that world, to see, where some of my thinking might have aligned with his, or maybe where we would agree on some things or disagree on some things. So I think that the back-to-back presentations will be an interesting perspective. So, as I was saying, the world is complicated. It's changing very fast, and we have a lot of new technologies and trends that are impacting the customer experience. And I read a statistic that said that the customer expectation is at an all-time high, right? It's just, companies like Amazon and Google are raising our expectations for what we expect as a customer experience. And today I want to talk about, a handful of things that we're seeing that are really disrupting a lot of industries. And the thing that I like about this list is that, a lot of these things have kind of become household names, but they're also kind of in their infancy. And where they'll take us, we'll see. And if I had done this presentation a year ago, this list, or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, this list would probably look very different. So it just speaks to how quickly things are changing. So I'm going to talk through a few of these trends and technologies, and talk about how I think they might impact the patient experience. So the first one that I want to talk about was blockchain technology. So just a quick show of hands, who has heard of blockchain? Right, almost everybody. Second question, who has heard of it but still doesn't really understand exactly what it is? Okay, yeah. So I'll try to give a quick overview. So if you've heard about blockchain, you've probably heard about it in the lens of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. And it's the underlying architecture technology that enables cryptocurrency. And two of the core tenets of cryptocurrency is that they wanted to make a currency that is decentralized and secure. So decentralized, as opposed to our, fiat currency, which is controlled by a centralized bank, they wanted to make something that was decentralized. And there's, a million different talks that you could go to discuss the merits of, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and if those are, viable solutions. But in order to make something that was decentralized, they had to create some technology to enable that. And, that's what blockchain does. So it's kind of like a decentralized database. So if you had a traditional database and multiple, computers calling that one database, every time there's a change, the database has to be updated and the computers, reflect that change. Blockchain, it's like taking that database and spreading it across everybody who's in that blockchain or in that network. So if I make an update on my end, you get the same update on your end. And it allows for this, quicker transactions and lower cost of transactions. So, banks and financial institutions are really taking note of blockchain because it allows for them to create transactions at a faster rate and at a cheaper rate. And it is also highly secure because every time there's a transaction that takes place, there is an encrypted hash on both sides that allows this stuff to be very secure, but also very transparent to anybody who's on the blockchain. So, where is there a practical application for blockchain in healthcare? Well, I think a couple spots, and one of which is medical records. We've come a long way with electronic medical records in the last 15 years, but it's still kind of this arduous, cumbersome task to get your medical records. Like if you wanted to just get your whole health history, I don't even know if I could do that or where to begin, and it's not easy, right? So the idea that medical records could be built with an underlying blockchain technology would allow for a more decentralized approach to getting those medical records, and if you change doctors or healthcare networks, you wouldn't lose the ability to always kind of go back to that blockchain and get your records. The other area that I could see blockchain, disrupting or playing a role in is around healthcare billing. So we're here talking about the patient experience, and is there any worse of an experience than trying to understand a healthcare bill? I mean, can you imagine, any other scenario in your daily life where you got a bill for something and it was like a healthcare bill and you thought that was, an acceptable way to get a bill? No, of course not. It's just something that we've become used to, and even in the simplest terms, if I go to my doctor for my annual physical and I go and I get weighed and I get my blood pressure and some blood taken and I'm in and out in 25 minutes, well, it takes 6 weeks to get the bill for that. And when I get it, it's 3 inches thick. There's 10 pages of disclaimers and a bunch of stuff that I kind of just throw away. And then when I get to the part that looks like a bill, it's very confusing. I've got my premium, my co-premium, my insurance, my co-insurance, my FSA, my HSA. And it's really kind of hard to understand. And then when I finally get down to the part that makes sense as a bill, it says, well, this is how much something costs, and this is what you paid, and this is what you owe. Right below it, it says this is not a bill. Which, okay, so what have I been doing here? I don't even know what to do with this piece of paper. I usually just leave it on my desk for like 3 or 4 weeks until I feel like I guess I can throw this thing away. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, I get the actual bill, and then I think, well, should I pay this? Because I feel like it's going to change, and then 3 or 4 weeks later, I get another one, and it's different. So, I mean, it's just this whole convoluted, world we're living in, and it's not because I don't think that healthcare is complicated. It is super complicated. We have this whole, you have so many people involved, so many people that need to get paid, and that's not going to change, right? That's always going to exist. And but where blockchain could help with this, and where like performing rights organizations like music and the acting is you can build in smart contracts to blockchain, which is basically saying like for music, this is a place where a lot of people have to get paid along the way, and historically musicians would get paid like a year later because they had to pay this person, and then they send the bill to this person, and they get paid, and they get paid, and they get paid. Well, now what they're doing is they're building in smart contracts into the blockchain, which basically says, this person gets this percentage, this person gets this percentage, this person gets this percentage, and when they process the transaction, it all happens all at once. So instead of going in like series and this like handoff, relay race, it all happens at once. So, I could see that becoming, more commonplace in healthcare and really at least reducing some of the complexity for the end user. And I think that, businesses like Google and Amazon, they're super complicated businesses. They're not, it's not like this is a simple thing when you sit on the couch and you order something on your phone and it shows up the next day. Like, can you imagine all the stuff that's happening to make that happen? But the great companies are abstracting that complexity, away from the end user. And healthcare really hasn't had to do that historically, but now they're going to have to because the customer is going to expect it and somebody will do it. And so, moving on to one of my other favorite topics is voice assistants. So show of hands, who here uses a voice assistant? Google, Alexa, Siri? Yeah, so almost everybody. And I've asked this before, and even like a year ago, it was a much smaller number, and going back like 3 or 5 years ago, almost nobody. And so the voice is growing at this just extreme exponential rate, and voice is becoming this expectation. I've read some statistics about by 2021, over 1.8 billion people are going to be using voice assistants on a regular basis, and 54% of people using assistants today say it makes their lives easier, right? So this is not just asking Alexa for a dad joke and these types of kind of novelty things. These are people who are saying like I use this on my daily basis and it makes my life easier. So and even just for me, like I was talking to somebody last night and I was saying how I hooked up my lights, to be turned on by Alexa. And when I first did it, I sat in and I say to my wife, hey, look at this, Alexa, turn on the lights. And I thought it was, fun. Last night when I, went to bed in the hotel, I said, hey, Alexa, turn off the light. I can't do that here. And, it went from this thing that was this novelty to something that is like an expectation. And I was, I'm ashamed to admit, I was kind of angry. Like, I can't do this? Like, what's going on? And but it's only a matter of time before, every hotel says, well, the customer expectation is they got to control the lights by their voice. And that's just going to happen, right? There's no going back. And, the same thing I think we're going to see in healthcare. And, of course, turning on our lights is a simple thing. And, we don't have to deal with, privacy as much or, secure data. But, Amazon is taking note of this, and they're already working with companies to create Alexa skills that allow to pass HIPAA compliant data through voice. So people are taking note, and like I said, we're not going to go back the other way. But I really think that voice is going to become the preferred interface. So if you think about where we are today versus 10 or 20 years ago, it's pretty cool. Like you can log on to a healthcare portal and you can ask your doctor a question. I mean, that's pretty neat. I mean, you couldn't, if you wanted to do this before, you had to go in person, or maybe you could get them on the phone. So that's been a really nice advancement in technology. But I think it's not going to be long before we're asking our Alexas, saying hey, I just took this medication and I'm feeling, I have a headache. Alexa, can you ask Dr. Smith if this is a normal side effect? And then on the other side, you can see, maybe the doctors are using, voice to triage all of these things. And it's kind of feeling like a scene from the Jetsons, but like you can almost see it happening already where, doctors could be sitting in their office and maybe they're talking and they're saying, well, what does this patient think? Or what does this patient think? And they're giving responses, and those responses are coming back to the end user. And, maybe they're walking through the hospital and they're answering these questions. And like, this is just something that I feel like we're going to wake up one day and it's all going to be happening. I mean, it's almost here now. So, there's a million, practical reason or practical applications for health. But I think, we're going to see things like, filling subscriptions. Hey, your subscription is ready at the pharmacy. And then when you bring home the medication the next morning, Alexa says, hey, don't forget to take your medication. You could see, follow-up from coming out of a procedure, or surgery where your doctor could follow up with you through voice, or maybe simple things like making a doctor's appointment, or maybe you're on your way to the doctor's office and you say, hey Alexa, what's the wait time right now? So like all these things that are happening in our, in our normal world, I think they're gonna find their way into healthcare. And another thing that we've seen a lot of kind of come into play is mixed reality, right? So we have virtual reality and augmented reality, and virtual reality has been around for a long time, and sometimes this is just the case of kind of the tech and society needing to kind of converge on that, that cone of possibilities I was talking about, where people start to prefer it and they want it to happen. So, quick definition, virtual reality is when you take, a headset and you put it on your face and you see, a world that is not the one that we're in, and you can interact with it. And augmented reality is one where, you have the world that we're in now, but maybe you're using a device like a camera to, augment your experience in this reality, or this world that we're in. And, you see this with people all the time, and they take their phone and they put bunny ears on their head or sunglasses on, they play around and they send these photos to each other. Well, this is now making its way into the buying process. So when the internet first came out, people said, oh, nobody's ever going to buy anything online. They want to touch it and they want to feel it. And we got past that by having descriptions and images and videos and good return policies, and it really made it easy. And now people would buy a t-shirt online, no problem, you do it, you don't even think twice about it. But for a bigger purchase like a couch, maybe you're buying one like once every 5 years, there's still a barrier to entry to buy something like this. So what companies are doing is they're saying, well, here, take our app, open up the camera, and look at your room, and now virtually pull this couch into your room and see what it looks like. And of course, this is making it easier for people to transact, and it's taking, it's bridging the gap between intention and purchase, and it's lowering that barrier to entry. And again, this is something that people are going to expect. And I could see, not too long from now, when I go to the dentist, and afterwards my dental hygienist comes in and says, hey, are you interested in our teeth whitening service? I say, I don't know, should I be? Like, you're the one looking at them, what are you trying to say? But how much easier would it be if I could just lift up my phone and they could say, well, this is where your teeth are now, and you can slide the slider and you can see how white we could make them. That would be pretty neat. Or maybe my hair is thinning a little bit on the top and I want to see what I would look like with a hair transplant or something. So I think that this is just a matter of time before these things just kind of show up, and we're like, oh yeah, like, where did this come from? And I think that virtual reality will play a role in a couple different arenas. So I think that virtual reality is starting to disrupt things like training. So having the ability for maybe a surgeon or a doctor to train on a complex procedure that they wouldn't normally be able to do, or it'd be really expensive to do, or maybe having the ability to train groups of people who are remote and wouldn't have the ability to all collaborate together. I think we're going to see that become a lot more commonplace. And of course, the ultimate outcome is going to be, better healthcare for people, better results, higher success rates, and ultimately a better patient experience. The other place that we are starting to see virtual reality creep up in healthcare is, like immersion therapies, right? So if you want to get over a fear of heights or a fear of flying, you could, put on a device and be in a safe environment and be immersed in something and kind of, progress through a therapy to get over that. Or, the same holds true for something like PTSD, or, kind of anywhere where you need to be immersed into an environment that you couldn't actually do on your own. Another kind of going along the lines of these other devices, and of course the first presentation touched a lot on these things. IoT, that stands for Internet of the Things, or basically just any physical device that's connected to the internet. So that could be your toaster, or it could be your TV, or what have you. But in healthcare, of course, we're seeing a lot of these wearables. And just a couple stats here. So today there's already 26 billion of these connected devices, and by 2022, over 900 million people will be connected to a wearable 4G device, right? So almost 1 billion people are going to be wearing something on themselves every day, all day, collecting data that's connected to the internet. Not even Wi-Fi, right? Like just 4G, like beaming up to space, around the clock. And gathering all this data, right? So like, what are we going to do with all this data? And I think that we're going to kind of enter this age of enlightenment when it comes to knowing about our personal health, as individuals, because I think future generations are going to look back and they're going to say, well, the last 100 years we solved all these really complex health problems, at the macro level, curing these diseases and increasing, the life expectancy of people on a huge scale. But today, as individuals, we don't really know a lot about our health other than if we're in, kind of a crisis situation. For me, like the example I said, when I go for my annual physical, I get some blood work and I get a panel of results, and that's basically it for a year. And the rest is just like, do I feel good? Well, I think so. I'm good. Or do I have a headache or something? Or maybe I take some medication. But for the most part, like I'm just walking around kind of ignorant to my own health on a day-to-day basis. So I think that having all this connected data is going to unlock a lot about what we know about our personal health. And as a driver, with my insurance company, if I don't get into an accident, I get, a rebate on my premium, and I could totally see this happening in healthcare, right? If you're a runner and, you take care of yourself and you have all this information that's being monitored, why not, get a discount from your insurance company? And I think that, we're at the point now where, yes, we have these watches and they take care, they take care of knowing about our heart rate and calories burned. But as we talked a little bit about in the first presentation, there's so many other things that are coming on the scenes, and we're not far from being able to just be monitoring things like that you would get in that annual blood panel, right? So maybe you have devices that are monitoring your sweat, or maybe you can take blood tests really easily. And I think that this is going to allow doctors to help monitor their patients and really make better informed decisions about their patients. And for things like even as simple as diets, maybe you're collecting all this information. And I don't think this is going to stop at just the personal level, right? There's going to be this notion of the hospitals and doctor's office and healthcare facilities all being connected too. So you're going to go and you're going to gather all this information, and they're going to have all this information about you. And when you go to the doctor's office, you're going to have a better experience because they know more about you and they can provide more pointed feedback and pointed solutions to what you're going through. So, I think that what we're going to see is that the healthcare, facility, like the physical facility, is going to become one stop on the customer journey or the patient journey, where you're going to have all these other touch points throughout the day and throughout the week and throughout the years, and the physical location is just going to be one step of your healthcare solution, and it's not going to be just too dissimilar from banking, and of course it's not the same thing. But how often do you go to a bank now? Well, it's not like when we stopped going to banks that we stopped having control over our money. It's actually the opposite, right? We have more control over our money. We have more control on where we can invest and do all these things from home. And yeah, there still is a need to go to the bank, but when you go, it's for a specific thing. And of course, I'm not suggesting that we're going to just no longer have hospitals or doctors' offices, but you can kind of see the analog there between these two things. So we started talking a little bit about artificial intelligence at the tail end of the last presentation, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and machine learning. So artificial intelligence, it's kind of become this thing where it's a little bit of the boogeyman, like is AI gonna replace all of our jobs? And honestly, it probably will, some of them. But all artificial intelligence is just a system or a collection of systems that are put in place to try to solve problems that a human would typically be reserved to solve a problem for. So we've had robots forever, or the last 50 plus years, and those robots were created to basically simulate labor-based tasks. So an assembly line or a robot that replaces somebody on the assembly line. But now artificial intelligence is saying we need to create systems that can replicate brain power, right? And machine learning is basically just the idea of analyzing all of this data and using it to refine so that you can understand the data better and better, and you could then feed that data to something like artificial intelligence, and maybe artificial intelligence to then say, I analyze all this data, now I need more of this type of data. So you can see how all this stuff is connected, right? So where do we see artificial intelligence already in our day-to-day life? Well, online chatbots, right? If you go to your bank website and you have a question, chances are the first thing that you're going to interact with is a chatbot. And chatbots are an interesting case because this is another example of where the technology that we had to catch up to making this chatbot technology actually enjoyable for the end user, right? So our typical past experience with customer support was, you'd call somebody on the phone and they were, in the US. And then, as globalization started to happen and businesses had to, reinvest funds in other places, maybe they offshored their support. So you would call somebody in a different country and people would kind of complain about it and say, oh, I don't want to talk to this person or whatever. And then, as this trend continued, the customer experience kind of went down and down and down, because then maybe you were just, chatting, instant messaging with somebody in the US, and then maybe, you were chatting with somebody outside of the country. And then you kind of hit this like rock bottom of chatbots that were not AI powered chatbots. They were just like dumb chatbots that could answer a list of 10 questions, and anything else that you asked them, they would just say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. But now with AI, these chatbots are learning about every interaction that you have with them. So, imagine if you talked, so they're learning about the interactions that you have with them, but what everybody is having with them. So imagine if you called your customer support representative and they had the experience of 1 million phone calls, right? Like, they would be pretty good at answering your question. So that's what we're seeing with chatbots. And the reason why this is interesting is because already 45% of end users are saying, I prefer just going to a chatbot because they can answer quicker, they get you to what you want quicker, and they're smarter, they have more data, and they're able to solve these problems for you. So, of course, a chatbot is a very kind of simplistic solution, but you can kind of see where this starts making its way into a more complicated world, like healthcare. And I think that AI is going to revolutionize the one-to-one patient experience, right? So when I was talking about we're gathering all this data from wearables, well, what do we do with all this data? And if we have all these millions and millions of pieces of data, it's not really possible for an individual to review all that. And we're seeing, companies like Google and Amazon who are saying, we'll take all this data and we'll come up with some actionable results. So you can kind of see how if I have all this personal data about myself, maybe, artificial intelligence paired with, doctors could provide a more personalized experience. When we were talking about, we don't really know that much about my personal health. Well, maybe, the prescription I'm getting now is, exactly tailored to my specific biology or my specific needs versus, my neighbor who has, a similar situation, to me. So I think that we're going to see, allow kind of doctors and AI to collaborate together to make better informed decisions about their patients. And patients will, again, they'll value those interactions better and higher with their physicians, and they'll have this, higher customer experience. And I think that, we're going to see healthcare shift to being more proactive as a result of this. We're going to see our healthcare as this kind of ongoing series of refinements and tweaks versus just kind of reactionary mode that we've been in for a while. And so you could kind of play out the scenario in their head where I was talking about before. Well, maybe I'm asking my doctor a question, and I'm saying through the voice assistant, and I'm saying, hey, I have this headache, I started taking this medication, is this a normal result? Well, maybe the first line of defense is just an AI bot, and it says, well, actually, Ross, you should probably try taking 20 less milligrams of this drug. And of course, there's all sorts of ethical debates around if this makes sense or not, but you can kind of see how the world that we're living in could start to become more and more driven by this artificial intelligence. So, the last topic that I wanted to talk about was just this trend about the remote workforce and people working remotely. And, this isn't, an individual, single technology that's making this happen, but it's just the world that we're living is becoming more remote, and the expectation of what you can do from home has been, growing and growing and growing. So, people expect more from home. I read a statistic that said today 50% of people who are performing a job are able to do some portion of that job or some period of time of that job remotely from home. So that's pretty crazy when you think about it. Half the people can do their job from home. This is something that was not even really conceivable 25 years ago. And the other statistic that's interesting is that 90% of people who are working remote full-time say they're never going back to an office, right? So it's like, this is something that is here and it's not going to change. And of course, the customer expectations are that they are going to demand more from home, right? They can already shop from home. They can exercise from home. They can work from home. So they're going to expect their healthcare to come to them versus having to go to healthcare. And I think that where we're going to see telemedicine and telehealth kind of playing like a role in this is that yes, there's going to be there's going to be things that can happen remotely, but I also think that what we're going to see is that telemedicine in some cases is going to reduce delivery costs, and that cost can then that revenue can go and reinvest in other areas that could help the patient experience, right? So we've seen this in other industries where delivery mechanisms have been disrupted since the internet came out, right? We first saw it in the music industry and retail and film. But now that people are saying, well, we're okay with that experience. Like, we don't need to go to a store. We're okay with not buying a CD. And of course, in some of those instances, the expectation or the experience went from something that was acceptable or good enough, and they didn't mind dealing with it because the cost came down. Well, in other cases, we're seeing people actually even prefer that, right? So they're saving money on these delivery costs, and people are okay with it, and they actually prefer it. And even like a Netflix, for example, right? They're able to their delivery cost is obviously much cheaper to deliver video on demand versus sending DVDs out in the mail, and they could take that money and reinvest in better programming. And the ultimate result is a better customer experience. So I think that for telemedicine, we're going to see similar thing, and we're already seeing examples of this. Obviously, there could be examples of counseling where you used to go in person, but now you can be served remotely. And of course, if you start thinking about the other things that I was talking about in terms of connected devices and virtual reality and AI, right? You could now picture a world where maybe you could recover from an injury at home with the combination of some sort of device that you could wear and virtual reality, and maybe a physical therapist is showing you how to do your exercises and you're doing them remotely, and it's easier for the patient. It's better for accessibility. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, but you can kind of see where this is going. You can kind of see the trends of where this is going. So I wanted to save some time for questions, but some of the key takeaways of what I was talking about was I think that we'll see blockchain will be an underlying technology that will help reduce friction for things that are transactional. I think voice is going to become the preferred interface, and we're just going to see that become part of our everyday life and everyday life in healthcare. And I think that wearable devices are going to unlock all of this data that we have, and I think that AI is going to use it to personalize our experience. And finally, I think that telemedicine is going to play a role in redistributing that investment in other parts of the healthcare world. So that is my time, and I wanted to save some time for questions if anybody has any.